So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Percy Jackson. This is second part of the series. So let's start the series. Chapter 9, The Calm Before. Escaping the cavern was a blur of adrenaline, terror, and cold, crushing defeat. They didn't fight their way out, they fled. Percy used a desperate surge of water, drawn from the very moisture in the cavern air, to freeze a path across a seething channel of the glowing pain sea. Naruto threw down a smoke bomb charged with disorienting chakra that made the spectral echoes writhe and shriek. Annabeth led them through a side fissure she'd mapped in a frantic, 3-second glance. They stumbled back into the human-made tunnel, the dam's mundane thrum now a comforting, familiar heartbeat after the silent screams of the abyss. They didn't stop running until they burst out into the desert night, collapsing behind the rusted shed, gulping air that tasted of dust and freedom. No one spoke. The drive to find a motel was mechanical. Percy's hand shook on the wheel. Naruto sat in the back, staring at his own trembling fingers. Annabeth navigated with monosyllabic directions to the first flickering, vacancy, sign they saw, a place called The Mirage, that was anything but. The room was a clone of 100 others, brown, beige, stale. But tonight, it felt less like a dump and more like a bunker after a bombardment. They were shell-shocked. Percy turned the shower on scalding hot, and stood under it until his skin was lobster red, trying to scour the feeling of that cavern from his pores. The water couldn't touch the chill in his marrow. He could still see Zoe Nightshade's sad eyes, not as she was, but as the echo, a perfect weapon carved from his guilt. When he came out, Naruto was sitting on the floor, back against the bed, methodically cleaning and sharpening his kunai with a small whetstone. The shink-shink sound was rhythmic, obsessive. Annabeth was at the wobbly table, her notebook open, but she wasn't writing. She was staring at a blank page, as if the answers had been erased. Percy slumped onto the other bed. The silence stretched, thick and toxic. "We can't fight it," Naruto said, not looking up from his blade. His voice was hoarse, stripped of all its usual bravado. "The harder we hit, the stronger it gets. It's like punching smoke that eats your fist." "It's a logical paradox," Annabeth whispered. "An enemy that weaponizes your resistance. A problem that cannot be solved by direct application of force. It's unsolvable." "Nothing's unsolvable," Percy said, but the words sounded hollow even to him. He felt a surge of helpless anger. "There has to be a way. A weakness." "Its weakness is order," Annabeth said, finally looking up. Her gray eyes were haunted. "It feeds on chaos, on emotional and dimensional instability. To defeat it, we'd have to impose perfect, unbreakable order. We'd have to be static, unfeeling. And if we do that, we lose what we're fighting for." Another paradox. To win, they had to stop being themselves. Naruto set his kunai down with a definitive click. "It knew everything. Every doubt. Every person I've lost. It used Niji. It used Jiraiya's face in the Lotus Place. It doesn't just want to kill us. It wants to prove we're no better than the pain we carry." That was the core of it. Algos wasn't just trying to destroy their worlds. It was trying to destroy their meaning. To prove that heroes were just trauma in a fancy costume, that bonds were just preludes to greater pain. The despair in the room was a physical presence, heavier than the desert air. Percy couldn't stand it. He stood up, the cheap springs groaning. "I'm getting air." He didn't wait for a response. He slipped out the door, past the ice machine humming like a dying insect, and found a rusty external staircase leading to the roof. The roof was gravel and tar paper, still radiating the day's heat. The sky here, away from city lights, was a dizzying spill of stars. The dam was a distant, faintly glowing scar on the horizon. He could still feel its thrum in his teeth. A few minutes later, the roof access door creaked open. Percy didn't need to look. He knew the cadence of the footsteps. Naruto came and stood beside him, leaning on the low parapet. He'd taken off his headband and was running his thumb over the Konoha's spiral. "Couldn't breathe in there either, huh?" Percy said. "The walls felt like they were getting closer," Naruto admitted. He looked up at the stars. "Your sky's different too. The constellations are wrong. It's like the whole universe is reminding me I don't belong here." They stood in silence for a while, two boys from broken worlds under an alien sky. "What it said about me," Naruto began, his voice barely above a whisper. "The lonely cage. For most of my life, that's all I was to my village. A cage for the fox. A weapon to be feared. I hated them for it. I screamed for them to see me. He let out a shaky breath. Sometimes I still feel like that's all I am. Just a container for something too big and dangerous. That everything else, the Hokage dream, the friends, is just me painting over the bars. Percy listened. He heard the raw truth in it, the fear that not even the Ninetales' friendship could fully erase. He knew that fear. It was the reflection in the water Percy's eyes. My father, Percy said, the words pulled from a deep, dark place. Poseidon. He's not cruel, but he's a force. When he acknowledges me, it's like a tsunami paying you a compliment. You're grateful you survived it. He picked at a piece of loose tar. For years, I wondered if that's all I was to him, a powerful wave he'd accidentally set in motion. A useful natural disaster. My mom, she sees me. But the godly part? That's just a weapon. One that's gotten a lot of people killed. He'd never said it out loud, not so starkly. The weight of it sat between them on the warm roof. Kurama thinks you're an idiot, Naruto said suddenly, a ghost of a grin touching his lips. Percy blinked. What? He's been grumbling in the back of my head since the cavern. He says you have the emotional control of a seasick squid and the strategic sense of a concussed turtle. Despite everything, Percy snorted. Tell the overgrown flea I said thanks for the vote of confidence. But, Naruto continued, the grin fading, he also says, the strength of a container isn't just in its walls. It's in what it chooses to hold. A vase can hold poison or flowers. The Ninetales was my poison. Now, he's my power. My friend. I chose to change what my cage contained. He looked at Percy, his blue eyes catching the starlight. Your power, the sea, it can drown cities. It drowned Atlantis, right? But you use it to bring life, to protect. You chose that too. Percy absorbed this. The son of the sea god. The container of the fox. Both defined by the immense, dangerous power they housed. Both fighting the narrative that they were merely vessels for destruction. Aldous wants us to believe we're just the cage, Percy said slowly. Just the storm. That the pain we've seen and caused is our only truth. Yeah, Naruto said, clenching the headband in his fist. But it's lying. It's only telling the first half of the story. Yeah, I was a cage. Yeah, you're a storm. But we're also the gardeners. And the lighthouses. He shrugged, embarrassed by his own metaphor. Or something. Believe it. For the first time since the cavern, Percy felt a flicker of something other than dread. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was defiance. A stubborn refusal to let a primordial embodiment of misery have the final edit on their lives. We can't fight it with chaos, Percy said, the idea forming like a cool current in his mind. And we can't become statues. But what if we fought it with a different kind of order? Not stillness, but harmony? Naruto frowned. Like a combo move? We tried that. The water Rasengan thing. It just made a bigger mess. Not a combo move, Percy said, standing up straighter. A unified move. In the cavern, when we fought separately, it fed on each of us individually. What if we don't give it two separate sources of pain and power? What if we give it one thing? Something it can't consume because it's the opposite of chaos. What's the opposite of chaos? Naruto asked. Percy thought of the sea. Not in a storm, but in its eternal, rhythmic order. The tides, governed by the moon. The currents, weaving a stable pattern around the globe. He thought of the unbreakable loyalty of the camp, the structure of a family, the constant, steady beat of a heart. Trust, Percy said. A perfect, unbreakable trust. Not just between you and me, but between all parts of us. You and Kurama. Me and my heritage. Annabeth and her wisdom. We have to be so in sync, so aligned in purpose, that we become a single, ordered note. A chord instead of a cacophony. Naruto's eyes widened. He understood. It wasn't about power levels. It was about resonance. Like the teamwork between me and Kurama now. It's not me wielding him. It's us. Complete synergy. Exactly. All those feeds on dissonance. So we give it no dissonance to feed on. We go in there not as a demigod and a Jinchuriki, but as a unit. A single will. It was a crazy plan. It required a level of mental and spiritual coordination they'd never attempted. It meant lowering every defense, sharing every vulnerability, and trusting that the other would hold the line. The roof door opened again. Annabeth stepped out, her hair tied back, her expression still weary but clear. She'd been listening. Harmony against chaos, she said. It's theoretically sound. Emotionally, it's the only weapon we have left. She joined them at the edge. But it's a huge risk. If your synchronization falters for even a second, if doubt creeps in, Algos will exploit the crack and tear you both apart from the inside. We don't have another play, Percy said. I know. Annabeth looked at Naruto. Can you and Kurama achieve that level of unity with an outsider? With Percy? Naruto closed his eyes, communing with the entity inside. After a moment, he opened them. Kurama says it's a sentimental, foolhardy, and predictably human scheme. A real grin broke through, bright in the starlight. Which means he's in. He hates being predictable. Percy felt a surge of something like courage. It was fragile, but it was there. The three of them stayed on the roof, not talking much, just sharing the space and the silence. They watched the horizon where the dam lay. The enemy wasn't a fortress to be stormed. It was a sickness to be healed. And they were proposing to heal it with the most volatile, unpredictable substance in any universe, trust. Later, back in the room, they made their preparations. Not of weapons, but of mind. They talked through their fears, openly, without shame. Percy spoke of his terror of the pit, of becoming like the monsters he fought. Naruto spoke of the deep-seated fear that he was, at his core, just the Nine-Tails rage in a human skin. Annabeth spoke of her fear of failure, of building something only to see it collapse. They didn't offer empty reassurance. They just listened. And in the listening, the fears lost some of their power. They became shared burdens, not isolating secrets. When they finally tried to sleep, the room no longer felt like a tomb. It felt like the quiet eye of a hurricane. The calm before. Percy lay awake, listening to Naruto's steady breathing from the other bed. He thought about what they were about to attempt. To willingly join his consciousness with another's, to face the embodiment of pain not with a sword but with a joined hand. It was the scariest thing he'd ever considered. But as he finally drifted off, the last thing he felt wasn't fear. It was a strange, solid certainty. They were going back into the depths. Not to fight the chaos. They were going to sing it a lullaby. And their song would be the story of two containers who chose to hold not poison, but a promise. A promise so ordered, so harmonious, that it would be anathema to the hungry, screaming void. It was their only shot. And for the first time since he fell out of the sky, it felt like enough. Next. Chapter 10. The Storming of the Lair. The pre-dawn desert was a monochrome world of blues and purples, holding its breath. The air was frigid, the chill sinking deep into their bones long before the sun would rise to scorch it away. They stood again at the hidden fissure, the yawning mouth that led back into the heart of the wound. This time, there was no stealthy approach, no whispered strategy. They walked openly, their footsteps crunching on the gravel with a grim finality. The thrum of the dam felt different now. Not just a mechanical vibration, but a slow, sick pulse, like a dying heart. The air from the tunnel exhaled the same cold, mineral ozone stench, but it carried a new note, anticipation. Algos knew they were coming. It was waiting. They didn't speak as they descended. The plink, plink, plink of water was a mocking metronome counting down to the end. The transition into the fused stone, the bruise-colored bioluminescence, it all felt more intense, more aware. The walls seemed to watch them, the light pulsing in time with their heartbeats. When they stepped back onto the stone platform overlooking the Pain Sea, the cavern had transformed. The swirling, viscous luminescence was no longer slow and chaotic. It churned in violent, crashing waves, throwing up sprays of psychic residue that stank of sulfur and burnt sugar. The island in the center, with the pulsing pillar of Algos, was wreathed in a crackling storm of dark energy. The moaning chorus had risen to a shrieking gale, a symphony of every sob, every scream, every whimper from their combined histories. The avatar of Algos stood before the pillar, its form more solid, more defined. It had shaped itself into a vaguely humanoid silhouette of shimmering gray and deep violet, featureless, but for two pits of absolute black where eyes should be. It didn't speak. Its presence alone projected the words into their minds, a cold, invasive pressure. You return. The meal presents itself. We're not your meal, Percy said, his voice steady despite the psychic onslaught. He uncapped Riptide, the bronze blade glowing with a defiant, clean light. We're the check. You bring your chaos, your doubt, your fragile, bleeding bonds. I will feast on their splintering. From the raging sea, the echoes rose again. But they were no longer phantoms. They were more solid, more detailed, their eyes burning with the same void-black pits as Algo's. Zoe Nightshade, Luke Castellan young and old, Kronos, Niji, Itachi, Arachne, and new ones, a figure of Sally Jackson, weeping, a figure of Irika Sensei, turning his back, a phantom of Annabeth's mother, Athena, holding a scale that tipped towards failure. Ignore them, Annabeth shouted over the shrieking gale. They're just distractions. Focus on the harmony. But it was impossible to ignore. The Sally Echo reached for Percy, her face a mask of mortal terror. Percy, please, it's too dangerous, come home. The voice was perfect, shattering. The Irika Echo looked at Naruto with profound disappointment. After all I did for you, you bring this catastrophe to another world? The emotional assault was a physical wall. Percy's resolve wavered, a spike of protective guilt lancing through him. Naruto flinched as if struck. See? The first fracture. The first note of my song. The echoes attacked. Percy was forced to parry a furious assault from the Kronos Echo, its scythe of shadow clashing against Riptide with bone-jarring force. Each impact sent a bolt of remembered agony, the weight of the sky, the feeling of his body failing, through his system. He wasn't just fighting a phantom, he was reliving the trauma. Naruto was a whirlwind, dodging the gentle fist of the Niji Echo, while the Itachi Echo launched a barrage of phantom shuriken that dissolved into crows that pecked at his mind, whispering of clan slaughter and failed promises. You couldn't save Sasuke, they cawed. You can't save this world either. Annabeth dueled the young Luke Echo, her face a tragedy of conflict, while the Athena Echo stood to the side, judging, her voice cutting through the din. A flawed plan, daughter. Sentiment over strategy. You will lose everything. They were being torn apart, separated, each forced into their own private hell of memory and doubt. The harmony plan was crumbling before it could even begin. Algoz's feast had started. Percy took a grazing hit from the Kronos Echo's scythe across his ribs. It didn't cut flesh, but a wave of existential cold and despair flooded him, sapping his strength. He saw Naruto get pinned by a combined attack, a phantom Rasengan slamming into his guard, driving him to his knees. This isn't working, Percy's mind screamed. We're not strong enough. He locked eyes with Naruto across the chaos. The ninja was on one knee, straining against the pressure, his chakra flaring erratically, blue, then flickers of angry red. His eyes were wide, not with fear, but with furious, frustrated determination. And in that moment, Percy saw it, the same look he'd seen on the roof. The refusal to let the story end this way. We're not trying to be stronger, Percy thought, the realization a cold slap. We're trying to be one. He stopped fighting the Kronos Echo defensively. As the shadow side came down for a finishing blow, Percy didn't raise Riptide to block. He dropped his guard. He turned his back on the phantom of the Titan King, an act of utter, insane trust, and instead, he reached out, not with his hand, but with his will. He focused not on his own pain, but on the shimmering, struggling bond he felt with the bright, chaotic presence that was Naruto Uzumaki. He envisioned it not as a thread, but as a conduit. A shared river. Across the platform, Naruto saw Percy drop his guard. For a heart-stopping second, he thought it was surrender. Then he felt it, a pull, not of force, but of invitation. An open channel. Percy was offering him everything, his power, his fear, his will. No walls. It was the most terrifying thing Naruto had ever been offered. He didn't hesitate. He stopped pushing against the phantom attacks. He let the Niji Echo strike land, a ghostly blow that felt like his chakra points being sealed, a memory of his greatest defeat. He embraced the feeling of helplessness, and instead of fighting it, he pushed it, along with every ounce of his own chakra, his hope, his stubborn ninja way, down the conduit Percy had opened. Harmony attempted. A pattern emerges. I will break it. Algoz's voice was a screech of tearing metal. The central pillar flared, and the psychic storm redoubled. The echoes became a blur, their attacks a hailstorm meant to shatter the fragile connection. But it was too late. The circuit was complete. In Percy's mind, a sun exploded. Not of heat, but of pure, vibrant life. He felt Naruto's memories not as a foreign intrusion, but as a second set of his own, the taste of miso ramen, the sting of 1,000 rejections, the crushing weight of a village's hope, the fierce, grudging warmth of a demon fox turned brother. He felt Kurama's presence, an ancient, grumbling, immense power, like a dormant volcano that was now, curiously, aligned with his purpose. In Naruto's mind, an ocean surged. He felt the vast, cool depth of Percy's power, the rhythm of the tides, the fury of storms, the quiet, nurturing pull of the moon's call. He felt the love for a mortal mother, the loyalty to a satyr, the aching, complicated pride of a divine father, the sharp, perfect clarity of Annabeth's love. He felt the scars of Tartarus, not as weakness, but as testament to survival. They were not merging. They were sinking. Percy's sea-green aura and Naruto's sun-gold chakra didn't mix. They began to spiral around each other in a perfect, double helix pattern, a dance of complementary opposites. Water and wind. Sea and Sunday demigod and Jinchuriki. The Echo's attacks hit this spiraling energy field and dissolved. The phantom pain, the traumatic memories, couldn't gain purchase. They were acknowledged, felt, but they were no longer isolating. They were shared burdens, and a shared burden is half the weight. Percy raised Riptide. Naruto formed a Rasengan. But they weren't acting individually. Percy guided the power, the immense, ordered, tidal force of their combined will. Naruto shaped it, the relentless, transformative, breaking and remaking force of their unified spirit. The Rasengan in Naruto's hand didn't grow larger. It changed. It became a sphere of swirling seawater and spiraling wind, held together by threads of golden chakra and sea-green light. It hummed with a profound, stable power. It was not chaotic. It was the eye of the hurricane given form. No. This is wrong. This is stagnation. This is order. Release the chaos. Algoz's avatar shrieked, lashing out with tendrils of pure void energy. The tendrils hit the spiraling aura around the boys and recoiled, scorched as if by something anathema. Percy and Naruto moved as one. They didn't run at Algoz. They walked. Slowly, deliberately. Each step was a hammer blow of harmony against the shrieking dissonance of the cavern. The pain sea recoiled from their path, the waves calming where they trod. The echoes wailed, their forms becoming insubstantial, their power leaching away, drawn back into the pillar. They were stories without an audience, pain without isolation to give it power. You cannot have unity without suffering. You cannot have bonds without loss. I am the truth between them. You're the lie between them, Percy and Naruto said, their voices blending into a single, resonant tone. Suffering happens. Loss happens. But they don't define the bond. The bond defines how we carry them. They reached the edge of the island. The central pillar of Algoz loomed, a vortex of screaming, hungry nothingness. This ends now, the unified voice stated. They thrust the harmonious orb, the spiraling oceanic Rasengan, forward, not as an attack, but as an offering. A seed of perfect, collaborative order. It touched the pillar. There was no cataclysmic explosion. There was a great unraveling. The shrieking cacophony stuttered, then smoothed into a single, sustained, fading note. The bruise-colored light brightened, purified, turning into a soft, white luminescence. The churning sea of pain stilled, its viscous glow clearing into a placid, deep blue pool, reflecting the now gentle light from the ceiling. The jagged, black rock of the island smoothed, grass and small, bioluminescent flowers sprouting from its surface. The avatar of Algoz looked at its hands as they began to dissipate, not in agony, but in quiet disbelief. This is not possible. Chaos is eternal. So is the tide, the harmonized voice replied. So is the sunrise. Your chaos was just a noise in the pattern. Be silent. With a final sigh that was the sound of a forgotten sorrow finally laid to rest, the avatar dissolved. The central pillar of energy faded, not into darkness, but into the gentle background hum of a healthy, sleeping earth. The wound was not destroyed, it was healed. Scarred over with something new and resilient. The double helix aura around Percy and Naruto flickered and parted. They stumbled apart, gasping, as the profound connection severed. They fell to their knees on the now soft grass of the island, drenched in sweat and trembling with utter exhaustion. It felt like they'd run a marathon in their souls. The cavern was quiet, peaceful. The air smelled of clean water, ozone now fresh like after a rain, and blooming night flowers. Percy looked at his hands. He could still feel the ghost of Naruto's chakra, the echo of Kurama's growl. He looked over at Naruto, who was panting, a dazed, triumphant grin spreading across his face. Naruto wheezed. We did it. Believe it. Percy tried to laugh, but it came out as a cough. Yeah. We sang it a lullaby. Annabeth ran across a suddenly solid path that had formed across the now calm pool, her face alight with stunned victory. She reached them, helping them both to their feet. They stood, leaning on each other, 3 points of a triangle in the heart of a healed scar. It was over. Algo's was gone. The first wound was closed. But as their breathing slowed and the adrenaline ebbed, a new, subtle wrongness prickled at the edge of Percy's senses. The healing felt complete, but the cavern's new peace was tentative, fragile, like the first layer of ice on a pond. He looked up at the ceiling of the cavern, where the rock met the impossible weight of the dam above. A single, hairline crack of the old, bruise-colored light remained, pulsing weakly once, twice, like a dying ember. Then it went dark. The victory was real. But as they turned to leave the sanctum they had just saved, a silent, shared understanding passed between them. Healing a wound didn't mean the blade was gone. It just meant it had been pulled free. The hand that held it was still out there, somewhere in the bleeding edges of their still-connected worlds. They had won the battle. But the War of the Worlds had just begun. Next. Chapter 11. Heart of the Hunger. The silence in the healed cavern was profound, a living stillness that hummed with the echo of their victory. It should have felt good. It felt like the aftermath of a bomb blast, a ringing quiet where the shape of the world had been permanently altered. The air was clean, tasting of minerals and that fresh rain ozone, but it was thin, insubstantial, as if reality itself was holding its breath. They stumbled out of the fissure just as the true dawn broke over the desert, painting the sky in violent hues of rose and gold that seemed too garish, too loud for the hollow peace inside them. The drive back to the motel was wordless. The green machine's rattles were the only sound, a mundane percussion to their seismic inner silence. Back in the brown room, they performed the rituals of survival on autopilot. Annabeth cleaned a shallow cut on Percy's arm from a glancing blow he couldn't even remember taking. Naruto methodically resealed his kunai pouch. Percy stared at the sad clown painting, seeing not a clown, but the swirling, hungry void of Algo's eyes. "We did it," Annabeth said finally, her voice firm, a statement to convince herself as much as them. "The prophecy's third line, to silence the hunger that rises within. We silenced it. The first wound is closed." "Yeah," Percy muttered, flexing his hand. He could still feel the phantom sensation of Naruto's chakra intertwined with his, a ghost limb of power and brotherhood. "So why does it feel like we just put a bandage on a volcano?" Naruto looked up from his pouch, his blue eyes shadowed. "Kurama's agitated. He says the silence is waiting. He says a hunger like that doesn't have a heart you can stab. It's a condition. A state of being." He tapped his chest. "We didn't kill the Nine Tails. We made peace with it. This feels like we just made it take a nap." The truth of it settled over them, colder than the desert night. They had imposed harmony on a local infection. They had not cured the disease. As if summoned by their dawning dread, the world began to itch. It started as a pressure change, the same one Percy had felt before the sky tore over camp. The motel walls seemed to breathe in, then out. The light from the window took on a gritty sepia tone. The distant, comforting thrum of the dam stuttered. For 1, 2, 3 heartbeats, it stopped. In that absolute silence, they heard it, a faint, collective sigh of relief from 1,000 miles away, followed by a low, resonant crack. Not a sound from outside. A sound from everywhere. The hairline fracture in the healed cavern ceiling. It hadn't been a dying ember. It had been a fuse. "No!" Annabeth whispered, rushing to the window. The desert outside was shimmering. Not with heat haze. It was like looking through flawed glass. Patches of the sky showed different times of day, deep twilight next to bright noon. A clump of sagebrush 50 yards away flickered, replaced for a second by a lush, alien-looking fern from a forest Naruto recognized with a jolt, before snapping back. "The walls are crumbling," Percy said, horror dawning. "Closing the wound. It wasn't the cure. It was the trigger. The pressure had to go somewhere." The damn thrum returned, but it was wrong, a discordant, grinding vibration that shook dust from the ceiling. Then, a new sound threaded through it, a deep, tectonic groaning, coming from the direction they'd just left. They were in the van and speeding back towards the dam, before a single word was spoken. The sky was now a sick patchwork quilt of realities. They passed a gas station where the attendants were frozen in time, one mid-pour, his face a mask of confusion as the soda in his customer's cup flickered between cola and what looked like liquid silver. A road sign for Las Vegas intermittently read, "Kanahadakur, 5 miles." The Hoover Dam, when they skidded to a stop, was a scene of silent, surreal catastrophe. The massive concrete curve was intact, but it was bleeding. Not water. light, and darkness, and things that were neither. From every construction joint, every vent, geysers of chaotic energy spewed, plumes of green genjutsu mist, torrents of star-studded void, geysers of primal Greek earth and fire. The air above it swirled into a colossal, slow-moving vortex, a hurricane eye where the laws of physics were merely suggestions. At the base, where the access fissure had been, the canyon wall had torn open like a rotten fruit. A river of fused realities poured out, not water, but a sludge of half-formed landscapes, melting memories, and screaming, tangled energies. It was the heart of the hunger, not silenced, but ruptured. Standing at the epicenter, knee-deep in the flowing chaos, was a new form. It was Algo's, but no longer an avatar. This was its true face, given shape by the catastrophic release. It stood 3 stories tall, a shifting, unstable titan. One arm was the muscled, bronze limb of a Greek titan, crackling with earthy power. The other was a sleek, artificial-looking prosthesis of gleaming black stone and red chakra lines, like a tailed beast's limb crafted by Hephaestus. Its torso was a storm cloud shot through with lightning and the crimson glow of the Ninetales cloak. Its head was a nightmarish fusion. One side was the stern, bearded visage of Kronos, etched in sorrow and rage. The other was the bestial, fox-like muzzle of the Ninetales, one eye burning with Kurama's intelligent orange, the other a spinning, chaotic Manjikyu Sharingan that wept black tears. Its wings were not of feather or leather, but of tattered spacetime, flickering with scenes of both worlds' tragedies. This was no longer the daimona of pain. This was the amalgam. The physical, screaming result of 2 worlds' traumas forcibly sutured together by the failed healing. It was chaos incarnate, given a voice that shook the canyon. You gave me form. The voice was a cataclysm. Kronos' regal boom layered over Kurama's world-ending roar, overlaid with the hiss of dissolving reality. You sought order in the wound. You made a scar. A scar is a weakness. A focal point. I am the scar. It took a step forward. The ground didn't shake, it unmade. Where its foot fell, the asphalt of the road didn't crack. It transformed into a patch of glowing lava-released jutsu that bubbled next to a spreading pool of Lethe's forgetful water. I am the hunger between worlds. And now, I am hungry for you. The amalgam's titan arm reached out, and the very air coalesced into a massive, jagged scythe of celestial bronze and cursed chakra. Its tailed beast arm swept forward, and 9 phantom tails of corrosive red energy, each tipped with a weeping Sharingan eye, lashed towards them. This was it. The final fight. Not in a hidden cavern, but in the broken open heart of the merged world, under a patchwork sky, against an enemy that was the literal embodiment of their failure. Scatter! Percy yelled, diving sideways as a phantom tail smashed the spot where he'd been standing, leaving a crater that flickered between earth and acidic mud. Naruto erupted into motion, a blur of orange and gold. Shadow Clone Jutsu! A dozen clones poofed into existence, swarming the amalgam's legs, kunai and Razengans flashing. The clones' attacks were like pebbles against a mountain. The amalgam didn't even look down. A pulse of chaotic energy from its body dissolved them all into puffs of incoherent light. Annabeth was already analyzing, shouting over the roar. It's not a being. It's a phenomenon. Attacking its body is useless. We have to destabilize the fusion point. The point where the 2 world energies are knotted. Where? Percy shouted, rolling behind a transformed boulder that was half granite, half crystalline chakra. Its core, where the Titan and Fox energies meet in the chest. The amalgam's Kronos eye fixed on Annabeth. Wisdom. The first betrayal of chaos. It opened its maw, and a beam of concentrated void, threaded with the gray misery of Algos' original power, lanced towards her. Percy acted on instinct. He didn't pull water from the air. He pulled it from the conflicting realities around them, from the pool of Lethe, from a flickering rain cloud, from the sweat of his own terror. He formed a shield not of clean water, but of a swirling, desperate slurry of every liquid he could command. The void beam hit it. The shield didn't hold. It screamed, the liquids evaporating into meaningless steam, but it deflected the beam enough to miss Annabeth by inches. Naruto saw the opening. He channeled wind chakra to his feet, sprinting up the amalgam's titan arm like it was a mountainside. He aimed for the joint where the bronze flesh met the stormcloud torso. Wind style! Raisin shuriken! He roared, launching the screaming saw blade of chakra. It connected. For a glorious second, it bit deep, shearing through chaotic energy. Then the amalgam's fox muzzle snarled. The red chakra lines on its black arm glowed, and the raisin shuriken was absorbed, its furious wind energy siphoned away to fuel the storm around them. My power is your power. My pain is your pain. You strengthen me with every blow. It backhanded Naruto. The blow wasn't just physical, it was psychic. Images of Sasuke's defection, of Jiraiya's body in the rain, of the villagers' early hatred, flooded Naruto's mind as he flew through the air, crashing into the side of their van, which dented with a sound like a dying animal. Percy charged, riptide a streak of bronze. He feinted high, then dove low, aiming for the creature's ankle, a move that had worked on giants. The amalgam simply ceased to be solid where he struck. His sword passed through mist and lightning, and a retaliatory kick from a leg that was suddenly solid sent him skidding across the ground, tasting blood and ozone. They were losing. Horribly. Their greatest strengths were being turned against them, their teamwork rendered null by an enemy that fed on conflict itself. The amalgam grew taller with each of their attacks, the vortex in the sky spinning faster, consuming more of the stable world around them. Annabeth, seeing the hopelessness, did the only thing she could. She stopped trying to fight the monster. She started shouting coordinates, patterns, weaknesses in the flow of chaotic energy, trying to create order from the outside. Patterns! The prison of the mind! The amalgam Sharingan eye spun, and a wave of psychic force hit Annabeth. She cried out, clutching her head, as her brilliant, ordered thoughts were forcibly tangled, her memories of architectural plans scrambled with nightmares and nonsense. Percy pushed himself up, his vision swimming. He saw Naruto struggling to his feet by the van, his orange jacket torn, his face a mask of furious, desperate determination. He saw Annabeth on her knees, mentally assaulted. He saw the amalgam, a god of two-world sorrows, growing ever stronger. Harmony had worked in the closed system of the wound. But here, in the open, bleeding reality, their harmony was a tiny, ordered candle against a hurricane of discord. The amalgam raised its scythe, aiming for the defenseless Annabeth. Kronos' face was triumphant. The fox muzzle was ravenous. In that frozen, terminal moment, Percy's eyes met Naruto's across the broken battlefield. No words passed between them. No plan formed. Only a silent, screaming agreement. They had one move left. Not an attack. A sacrifice. The ultimate act of trust. The final, desperate harmony. To win, they would have to stop fighting the chaos. They would have to invite it in. Next. Chapter 12. Sea and Whirlpool. The air was soup, thick with churning energies, the smell of ozone, spilled divinity, and burnt chakra. The sound was a physical weight, the amalgam's roar, the shriek of tearing realities, the groan of the dam under metaphysical stress. Percy's lungs burned with every gasp. He pushed himself up from the ground, the taste of blood and void-tainted dust in his mouth. His vision swam, focusing on 2 points of terrible clarity. Annabeth on her knees, clutching her head as the amalgam psychic assault ravaged her ordered mind, and the colossal, fused side of bronze and chakra rising for a final, annihilating strike. Time didn't slow. It fractured. In the splintered moment, Percy's gaze ripped across the chaos and locked with Naruto's. The ninja was by the wrecked green machine, one hand braced against its hot metal, breathing in ragged, wet-sounding gasps. Blood trickled from a gash on his temple, mingling with the dust. But his eyes, those blazing, impossible blue eyes, held no surrender. They held a wild, terrifying calculation. He looked from the descending scythe, to Annabeth, to Percy, and gave a single, sharp, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't a plan. It was a pact. An understanding forged in the shared crucible of the cavern, now tempered in the fire of certain death. The ultimate harmony. The final trust. Percy nodded back. A cold, sea-deep certainty washed through him, drowning the fear. He didn't raise Riptide to defend Annabeth. He threw it aside. The celestial bronze sword clattered on the shifting ground, a sound lost in the cacophony. The amalgam's Kronos face sneered. Surrender? A new pain. I will savor it. Not surrender, Percy whispered, the words torn away by the vortex. He spread his arms, an open, vulnerable target. He closed his eyes, not to shut out the horror, but to turn inward. He reached down past the terror, past the fatigue, past the demigod who was a weapon, to the core of what he was. The son of Sally Jackson. The brother of Tyson. The friend of Grover. The one who loved Annabeth Chase. He found the deep, quiet, endless well of the sea within him, not its storms, but its constancy. Its abyssal, patient, nurturing darkness that cradled life in its deepest trenches. He drew it up, not as a shield, not as a weapon, but as an offering. An open channel. At the same instant, Naruto didn't form a Rasengan. He slammed his palm onto the hood of the van. Reverse summoning, channeling jutsu, he bellowed, a technique never meant for this. He wasn't calling a toad. He was using his own body as the summoning circle, and the summon was every scrap of his being. He reached past his own pain, past the Jinchuriki's rage, past the Hokage's dream, to the boy who ate ramen alone, who believed in a friend beyond reason, whose will was a sun that refused to set. He grabbed Kurama's immense, grumbling power and didn't wield it. He invited it forward, not as a tenant, but as a partner in this final, mad gamble. He opened every chakra gate, not to unleash power outward, but to become a conduit. A blinding Suncore beacon. Two streams of pure, self-defined essence, one a bottomless, accepting ocean, the other a boundless, giving sun, erupted into the chaotic space between them. The amalgam scythe faltered, inches from Annabeth's head. The void in its shared eyes churned with confusion. This was not an attack. This was not resistance. This was invitation. Anathema. The two streams, sea green and sun gold, did not clash. They flowed toward each other, meeting in the middle of the battlefield. But they didn't merge. They began to spiral, faster and faster, creating a maelstrom of ordered energy in the heart of the chaos. A double helix of perfect, voluntary synergy. What is this? A new pattern? I will devour it. The amalgam shifted its aim, driving the scythe into the swirling column of light. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic for the amalgam. The scythe, a weapon of fused pain and conflict, hit the harmony vortex and shattered. Not into pieces, but into its constituent parts, shards of celestial bronze that dissolved into starlight, and fragments of cursed chakra that evaporated with fox-like yelps. The backlash traveled up the amalgam's arm. The titan flesh cracked like dry earth. The tailed beast prosthesis hissed and sparked, the red chakra lines going dark. The amalgam roared, a sound of genuine agony for the first time. No! Dissonance! Give me dissonance! It lashed out with its phantom tails, each one a whip of concentrated trauma. They struck the swirling vortex. And where they touched, the tails didn't recoil, they were absorbed. The pain, the memory, the chaotic energy was drawn into the vortex, where the sea's depth accepted it, and the sun's light transformed it, dissolving the hatred into mere memory, neutralizing its power. The amalgam stumbled back, its form flickering. The patch of Chrono's face contorted in rage, the fox muzzle snarled in primal fear. It was being starved. Its very substance, which was conflict and pain, was being harmonized out of existence upon contact. But Percy and Naruto were paying the price. Percy felt like he was holding open a portal to the Mariana Trench. The pressure was immense, crushing. He could feel the amalgam's chaotic essence flooding into him through the vortex, the despair of Chronos, the rage of Kurama, the infinite loneliness of Algos. It was a psychic poison, and he had to use the ocean's vastness to dilute it, to make it meaningless. Every second was an eternity of screaming ghosts in his mind. Naruto was a supernova contained in skin. His veins glowed gold under his flesh. Kurama's voice in his head was a constant, furious growl of effort. Brat! This is unsustainable! You're burning us both out! Naruto didn't answer. He just fed more of himself, more of their combined spirit, into the sun core of the vortex, using its transformative light to burn away the poison Percy was diluting. He was the forge. Percy was the quenching sea. They were a perfect system. A closed loop of acceptance and transformation. And it was killing them. Annabeth, freed from the psychic assault, saw it. She saw the blood streaming from Percy's nose, the terrifying, radiant cracks appearing on Naruto's skin as if he were made of overstressed porcelain. She saw the amalgam, wounded and shrieking, beginning to rally. It realized direct assault was futile. It changed tactics. It focused its power not on the vortex, but on the source. The Chronos Eye glowed with a time-distorting power. It aimed a beam not of force, but of stagnation at Percy. A wave of crushing inertia, the feeling of being buried under the weight of millennia, of hopes turning to dust. It was the opposite of the sea's eternal movement. It sought to freeze his accepting depth into apathetic, dead stillness. The Sharingan eye on the fox side spun, targeting Naruto. It unleashed not an illusion, but a cascade of infinite fractals, a vision of every possible failure, every divergent path where his bonds broke, his dream died, his ninja way led to nothing. It was the opposite of the sun's singular, unwavering purpose. It sought to scatter his giving light into a million meaningless directions. Divide and conquer. attack the core concepts that powered their harmony. Percy gasped as the stagnation hit him. His connection to the deep, patient sea wavered. He felt heavy, old, useless. Why fight? Everything turned to sand in the end. The ocean itself would one day evaporate. His offering felt like a joke. Naruto cried out, clutching his head. The fractal failures overwhelmed him. He saw 1,000 worlds where he never saved Sasuke, where Konoha fell, where he died alone and hated. The brilliant, focused beam of his will began to splinter, to diffuse. The harmony vortex flickered. The double helix stuttered, its light dimming. The amalgam loomed over them, its form solidifying again, fueled by their renewed doubt. Yes! This is the truth. Order collapses. Harmony is a light toll between heartbeats. Its maw opened wide, a black hole forming between its jaws, a vortex of pure, entropic nothingness designed to swallow their weakened harmony whole and extinguish it forever. In the final, dimming light of their failing vortex, Percy's swimming vision found Annabeth. She was on her feet, her dagger in hand, but her face was a mask of utter helplessness. She couldn't fight this. No strategy could solve this equation. He looked at Naruto. The ninja was on his knees, golden light leaking from the cracks in his skin like molten ore, his eyes screwed shut against the fractal visions. This is it, Percy thought, the oceanic cold of the stagnation seeping into his bones. We gave it our best shot. A stupid, noble, harmony and trust shot. Then, through the numbness, he felt it. Not from himself. Not from Naruto. From the connection. A final, pulsing ember of that shared will. A last whisper from the sun to the sea. It wasn't a message. It was a feeling. A single, clear note in a dissolving song, together. Percy's fading will latched onto it. With the last of his strength, he didn't try to fight the stagnation. He did something infinitely harder. He pulled it. He drew the crushing weight of dead epics into himself, into the vast, accepting dark of his oceanic core. He would drown in it, so the connection might live a second longer. Across the field, Naruto did the same. He stopped fighting the fractal failures. He opened his eyes, the blue almost swallowed by gold, and he embraced them. Every failure, every broken path, he drew them into the core of his sun. He would let himself be scattered into a billion pieces of light, if it meant one piece could still reach Percy. In that simultaneous, ultimate act of self-sacrificial trust, the harmony didn't just reignite. It transcended. The flickering vortex didn't just stabilize. It inverted. It stopped drawing energy from them. It began pulling the conflicting energies from the amalgam itself. The stagnation beam flowing into Percy was yanked from the amalgam's chronos eye, tearing the temporal power from its source. The fractal cascade attacking Naruto was siphoned from the Sharingan, unraveling the ocular jutsu from within. The amalgam's roar turned to a shriek of violation, as the very concepts that made it up were being stolen. The titan arm crumbled into dust and memories of a lost age. The tailed beast arm guttered out, the red chakra line snapping. The stormcloud torso began to dissipate. They were no longer fighting it. They were uncreating it. By becoming the perfect, sacrificial vessel for its attacks, they had turned its own nature against it. A hunger that consumes all cannot survive when offered everything it is. The black hole in its maw winked out. The amalgam, now just a shriveled, weeping core of the original Algo's misery, wrapped in tattered spacetime, stumbled towards them, its forms dissolving. This was not the song, it gurgled, its voice now just the sigh of a lost child. No, Percy rasped, blood on his lips, holding the immense weight of stolen stagnation. It was a duet. The last of the Algo's core gave one final, silent pulse of negation, and dissolved into motes of gray light that were gently absorbed by the calm, deep blue pool their battle had left in the center of the scarred land. The vortex of harmony vanished. Percy and Naruto collapsed. The world did not right itself with a snap. The patchwork sky remained, but the violent churning ceased, the edges of the patches softening. The river of chaotic sludge from the canyon slowed, then stopped, its substances gradually settling, separating. The dam's thrum returned to its normal, powerful, stable rhythm. The heart of the hunger was not destroyed. It had been satiated, and insatiation had ceased to be. They had fed it until it could eat no more, and the only thing they had fed it was the one thing it could not truly digest, a harmony born of total, self-annihilating trust. Silence returned, not the waiting silence of before, but the deep, exhausted silence of a storm that has finally, mercifully, blown itself out. In the center of the settling calm, two broken forms lay on the cracked earth, not moving, while a third ran towards them, her cries the first, fragile sound of a world learning how to be whole again. Next. Chapter 13. The Sacrifice Play. The silence after the dissolution of the amalgam was not peaceful. It was the deafening quiet after a limb has been severed, shock holding the pain at bay. The air still tasted of charged ions and the coppery tang of spent power, but the violent churning of realities had subsided into a slow, weary seep. The patchwork sky bled softly at the edges, one reality gently diffusing into another. Annabeth reached them first, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Percy lay on his side, one arm outstretched as if still reaching for the vanished vortex. He was pale, too pale, his lips tinged blue. His breathing was shallow, each inhalation a wet, rattling struggle. When she touched his face, his skin was cold as deep ocean trench water. His sea green eyes were open, staring at nothing, reflecting the fractured sky. "Percy! Look at me!" Her voice cracked. She fumbled for the last full vial of nectar in her pack, tipping it between his lips. Most of it spilled down his chin, but a few drops went in. A faint flicker of warmth returned to his skin, but his eyes didn't focus. He was drowning on dry land, sinking into the abyssal stillness he'd used to swallow the amalgam stagnation. "He's in shock," she muttered, her mind racing through diagnoses that had no basis in mortal or divine medicine. "Soul shock." She turned to Naruto. He was worse. The ninja was on his back, arms splayed. The terrifying, glowing cracks that had webbed his skin were now dark, charred-looking fissures. They didn't bleed, they leaked a faint, fading golden smoke, his very life essence, his chakra, seeping away. His signature orange jacket was in tatters, the black shirt beneath scorched. His breathing was a rapid, shallow pant. His eyes were squeezed shut, his teeth bared in a silent rictus of agony. When Annabeth touched his shoulder, his skin was furnace hot, yet she felt a terrible, deepening cold beneath it. "Naruto!" She shook him gently. No response. He pushed too far, a guttural, exhausted voice echoed in her mind, not through her ears. It was ancient, gravelly, and thick with a pain that mirrored Naruto's. The fool. He opened the gate, and then broke the hinges. "He is leaking. We are leaking." Kurama. The Ninetales. Even its mental voice sounded diminished, frayed. "What do I do?" Annabeth asked aloud, desperation overriding the absurdity of talking to a demon fox in her head. "The sea brat, his death, it's the only counterbalance. The only thing vast enough to hold the pieces until they can stick back together." The voice faded, then rallied with immense effort. "But he's empty. He took in the poison. He needs an anchor. A reason to come back up." Annabeth understood with a clarity that cut like a knife. They were two halves of a balanced system that had been pushed past its limit. Percy had become a bottomless, stagnant sink. Naruto had become a scattered, dying star. Each needed what the other had been to restore equilibrium. But Percy was too deep to hear, and Naruto was too scattered to reach. She looked from one to the other, the two most powerful, stubborn idiots she'd ever known, now broken by the very thing that had saved everything. The prophetess's line echoed. "A choice of great pain neath a crimson moon's gaze." The moon above was not crimson. It was its normal, pale self, watching indifferently. But the choice was here. She couldn't heal them. She couldn't fight this. All her wisdom, all her strategy, was useless. All she had was them. And they were gone. A sob hitched in her throat. She was Annabeth Chase, daughter of Athena. She solved problems. She built plans. She did not fall apart at the climax. But this wasn't a climax. It was an aftermath. And in aftermaths, sometimes the only thing you could build was a bridge. The idea came not as a flash of genius, but as a slow, dreadful certainty. It was a terrible plan. A sacrifice in the truest sense. Not of life, but of something almost as precious. Control. Of outcome. Of self. She had to become the conduit. The translator. The anchor. She positioned herself between them. She took Percy's ice-cold hand in her left, her fingers intertwining with his limp ones. She took Naruto's burning, cracked hand in her right, feeling the residual chakra sizzle against her skin. Then, she closed her eyes, and did the hardest thing she'd ever done. She stopped being Annabeth the strategist. She stopped trying to fix, to analyze, to direct. She became a memory. A feeling. A story. She focused on Percy. She didn't send him thoughts. She poured feelings into that cold hand. The smell of his mother's blue cookies, warm from the oven. The sound of Tyson's joyful, rumbling laugh. The feeling of his first kiss with her on the pier at Camp Half-Blood, awkward, sweet, electric. The solid, reliable weight of Grover's friendship. She sent him the image of the ocean not as a stagnant depth, but as the playful waves of Montauk, the life-giving currents, the tide that always, always returns. She poured in every reason he had to swim back to the surface, every bit of warmth and life that his stagnant depth had forgotten. Then, she turned her focus to Naruto. Into that scorching, fragmenting hand, she pushed not her own memories, but the essence of what she'd learned of him. The taste of ramen shared with a lonely teacher. The fierce, protective love for a village that once hated him. The unbreakable bond with a fox made of fire and fury. The dream of a hat that wasn't about power, but about shouldering the weight so others could smile. She sent him the feeling of a sunny training ground, of a handshake with a rival-turned friend, of 1,000 voices chanting, "Naruto! Naruto!" She gave him focus. A single point of light in the fractal chaos. A North Star for his scattered brilliance. Home. She was not a demigod or a ninja. She was an architect of the heart, and she was building a bridge made of love and memory between a sunken sea and a shattered sun. It took everything. She felt herself unraveling at the edges, her own sense of self blurring as she channeled their essences, becoming a vessel for their identities. It was psychic surgery without a scalpel, conducted with bare, trembling soul. For a long, terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, Percy's cold hand twitched in hers. A faint, almost imperceptible warmth began to seep back into his fingers. The shallow, wet rasp of his breathing deepened, just a fraction. In her other hand, Naruto's scorching heat began to recede, pulling inwards, concentrating. The golden smoke leaking from his cracks thinned, then stopped. The charred fissures on his skin didn't heal, but they darkened from angry red to a scab-like brown. Annabeth held on, her own breath coming in short gasps, her vision swimming. She was the linchpin, and she was bending. "Come on," she thought, pouring every ounce of her own stubborn will into the bridge. "You two morons didn't go through all that to die on the finish line. You have to come back. For each other. For me. For all the people waiting in both your stupid, beautiful worlds." Percy's eyelids fluttered. His sea-green eyes, clouded and distant, slowly cleared. They shifted, searching, until they found her face. A whisper escaped his blue-tinged lips. "And Beth?" A single, hot tear traced a path through the dust on Naruto's cheek. His clenched jaw relaxed. His breathing evened out from a panic pant to a ragged, but steady, rhythm. He didn't open his eyes, but his cracked hand tightened around hers, a weak but definite squeeze. The bridge held. Annabeth let out a shuddering breath, the tension bleeding out of her so suddenly she almost collapsed. She didn't let go of their hands. She sat between them in the settling dust of the apocalypse, a daughter of wisdom who had finally learned that some problems aren't solved with a plan, but with a presence. That the most powerful strategy in any universe is simply to love someone enough to remember them back to themselves. Overhead, the patchwork sky continued its gentle, silent mend. The dam thrummed its steady, powerful song. In the distance, a coyote howled, the sound clean and normal in the desert night. They were alive. Broken, exhausted, teetering on the edge of something irreversible, but alive. Annabeth looked at the two warriors, one born of the sea, one forged in fire, now connected through her, and she allowed herself a small, trembling, triumphant smile. The sacrifice play hadn't been one of them dying for the other. It had been her offering up her need to control, to fix, and choosing instead to simply hold the space for them to find their way back. It was a different kind of heroism. A quieter, deeper kind. And as she sat there, holding their hands under the mending sky, she knew it was the most important thing she would ever build. Next. Chapter 14. The Combined Technique. The world came back in pieces. For Percy, it was the feel of hard-packed earth beneath his cheek, the cool night air on his face, and the warm, steady pressure of Annabeth's hand in his. His mind felt like a sea after a cataclysm, calm on the surface, but with profound, rearranged depths. The crushing stagnation was gone, replaced by a hollow, echoing fatigue. He remembered an abyss, and a single, persistent light pulling him up. He turned his head. Naruto lay a few feet away, eyes closed, breathing evenly. The charred fissures on his skin looked less like wounds and more like ancient, healed scars. His spiky blonde hair was matted with dust and sweat, but a faint, healthy pink was returning to his cheeks. Annabeth sat between them, her face pale and smudged with dirt, her gray eyes holding a look of profound exhaustion and deeper relief. She saw Percy looking and gave his hand a squeeze. "Welcome back." "Did we?" Percy's voice was a dry croak. "You did," she said softly. "It's over. The amalgam is gone. The wound is healing." Percy pushed himself up on his elbows, his body protesting with a symphony of aches. He looked around. The canyon was a mess, scorched earth, patches of weird, fused materials, a calm, deep blue pool where the river of chaos had been. But the violent, patchwork bleeding of the sky had stopped. The edges of the different realities were softening, blending into a stable, if slightly off, normalcy. The dam stood, silent and solid, its thrum now a comforting, grounding vibration. Naruto groaned, his eyes fluttering open. He stared at the mending sky for a long moment, then slowly sat up, wincing. He looked at his hands, flexing his fingers as if surprised they still worked. "Kurama?" he whispered. A weak, grumbling sensation echoed in the bond. "Alive. Unfortunately. You owe me approximately 900 years of sleep, brat." A wobbly grin spread across Naruto's face. He looked at Percy, then at Annabeth. "We're not dead." "Not for lack of trying," Annabeth said, but her tone was fond. They helped each other stand, a tangle of shaky limbs and shared, weary strength. They were a wreck. Clothes torn, covered in grime, blood, and metaphysical residue. But they were upright. They were together. They hobbled back to the remains of the green machine. One side was crumpled from Naruto's impact, the windshield webbed with cracks. Miraculously, it started after a few protesting coughs from the engine. The drive back to the motel was a silent pilgrimage. The desert, in the early dawn light, looked scrubbed clean, vulnerable. The weird flickers were gone, but a new, subtle strangeness lingered. A cactus that seemed a shade too blue, a rock formation that looked eerily like a stylized frog. The worlds weren't sealed apart. They had been stirred together, and now they were settling, leaving traces of each other behind. Back in the brown room, they tended to their wounds with the last of their supplies. The physical injuries were minor compared to the soul-deep exhaustion. They ate the remaining ambrosia squares, which now tasted faintly of both chocolate chip cookies and miso ramen, a confusing but comforting blend. As the sun rose properly, casting a normal, golden light through the grimy window, the weight of what came next settled on them. "The tear that brought me here," Naruto said, staring at his reflection in the dark TV screen. "It's gone. The instability is balanced. Does that mean I'm stuck?" Annabeth, who had been sketching the new, blended pattern she saw in the landscape on motel stationery, looked up. "The first wound is closed. The violent pull between the worlds is gone. But a connection was made. A channel was opened. It's like two continents that crash together. They're not separating again, but the earthquakes have stopped. There might be a stable passage now. Or there might not. We don't have the lore for this." Percy felt a twist in his gut. The thought of Naruto being trapped here forever was wrong. But the thought of him leaving, of this loud, bright, chaotic force vanishing from his world, felt like a different kind of loss. "We have to try," Percy said. "We have to see if we can send you home." Naruto nodded, but his usual blazing confidence was dimmed. "Yeah, I gotta get back. The village, they'll be worried. And I've got a Hokage seat to earn." He tried for a grin, but it didn't reach his eyes. They spent the day resting, recovering, and preparing. There were no grand prophecies to guide them now, no enemies to fight. Just a problem of physics and metaphysics. Annabeth theorized that the point of greatest stability, and therefore the best chance for a controlled passage, would be back at the epicenter, the now-healed cavern under the dam, or the calm pool above it. As dusk fell, they drove back one final time. They stood at the edge of the deep blue pool that had once been a sea of pain. It was mirror calm, reflecting the first stars of the evening. The air was still sacred. "So," Naruto said, shattering the quiet with his familiar, necessary noise. "How do we do this? Do I just jump in?" "The connection was made through our combined energies," Annabeth said. "Through the harmony you achieved. To reverse it, to open a door to your world instead of just a tear from it, you'll likely need to recreate that harmony. But focused outward. A beacon for your own reality to lock onto and pull you home." Percy understood. They had to perform the combined technique one last time. Not as a weapon, but as a signal flare. He and Naruto looked at each other. No words were needed. They had shared minds, shared burdens. They knew the rhythm. They stepped away from Annabeth, facing each other across the still water. Percy closed his eyes, finding the deep, steady well within. Not the stagnant abyss he'd become, but the living, moving sea, the connection to his father, to his friends, to this world he protected. He drew it up, letting a soft, sea-green light emanate from him, cool and patient. Naruto took a deep breath. He felt Kurama stir within, a sleepy but present power. He didn't draw on the fox's rage or immense chakra. He drew on their partnership, their hard-won trust. He thought of Konoha, of every face that made up his home. His chakra flared, not a raging inferno, but a warm, brilliant, sun-gold light. They didn't rush. They let their energies rise, not in conflict, but in recognition. The sea-green and sun-gold lights met in the air above the pool. This time, there was no violent spiral, no vortex. The lights intertwined gently, weaving together into a single, stable pillar of harmonious energy, a ladder of light stretching into the twilight sky. The effect was immediate but subtle. The air around the pillar began to sing, a low, harmonic hum that vibrated in their bones. The surface of the pool rippled, not from wind, but from a deeper resonance. In the heart of the pillar of light, a darkness began to form. Not the hungry void of algos, but a serene, star-studded blackness. A window. Through it, they glimpsed flashes, the stone faces of Hokage on a mountain, the rustle of leaves in a familiar forest, the warm glow of paper lanterns. It was working. Naruto's face lit up with a hope so pure it was painful to see. That's home! But the pillar of light flickered. Percy grunted, feeling a drain, a strain. The connection was stable, but it was a tunnel through infinite space, and holding it open required constant, immense effort from both ends. Naruto's world wasn't pulling. They were pushing a door ajar. It's not enough, Annabeth said, her analytical mind seeing the problem. The harmony is the key, but you need more power to turn it fully, to make the passage stable for more than a second. Naruto's expression fell. He looked from the flickering window to Percy's strained face. He understood. They could open a peephole, but not a door. Then, an idea struck Percy. A terrible, perfect, hilarious idea. Shadow clone jutsu, Percy said, his voice tight with effort. Naruto blinked. What? Why? Clones can't channel this kind of energy. They're just chakra constructs. Not for channeling, Percy interrupted, a wild grin spreading across his face. For multiplying. You make clones. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Not to fight. To form a structure. A single, massive conduit to focus our combined power. Naruto's eyes went wide as he grasped the insanity of it. He'd used clones for diversion, for training, for tactics. Never as architecture. But the theory, it was sound. Each clone was a piece of his chakra, his will. If they all linked, focused not on individuality, but on being a single, colossal lens. Believe it! Naruto yelled, the old fire blazing back. He slammed his hands together. Multi-shadow clone jutsu! Poof. Poof. Poof 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 poof. The canyon exploded with sound and smoke. Not dozens, not hundreds, but thousands of Naruto clones materialized in a vast, rippling wave around the pool. They stood shoulder to shoulder, a sea of orange and blonde under the darkening sky, all wearing the same determined grin. Annabeth stared, her mind boggling at the logistics, the sheer chakra control. Athena's breath. Listen up, the original Naruto shouted, his voice amplified by 1,000 throats. This is the plan. We're gonna make a giant me. A megazord of me. Form up. Pyramid style. Focus all your chakra on the original link. Don't think, just be the funnel. With a discipline that would make any army weep, the clones moved. They scrambled over each other with shinobi agility, building themselves into a vast, human pyramid centered on the original Naruto and Percy. It was a ludicrous, magnificent sight, a monument of cooperation, a mountain of identical, grinning faces all channeling the same purpose. Percy felt it immediately. The strain lessened. The pillar of harmonized light didn't just stabilize, it intensified, growing wider, brighter, more solid. The sea green and gold braided into a cord as thick as a redwood. The window at its center expanded, the vision of the other world snapping into sharp, stable focus. He could see the Hokage monument clearly now, see the village streets. The passage was open. Stable. A gateway between worlds. The original Naruto, standing at the apex of his own clone pyramid, turned to Percy. The grin was still there, but it was softer now, edged with the sorrow of goodbye. "That's my coupon, guy." Percy's throat was tight. He nodded, maintaining his focus on the sea energy. "Don't trip on your way out, Orange." Naruto looked at Annabeth. "Thanks, smart girl. For remembering me." Annabeth gave him a wobbly smile and a thumbs up, a gesture she'd picked up from him. "Go build your better world." Naruto took a deep breath, gave one last, sweeping look at the world that had crashed into his life, the desert, the dam, the two friends who had fought a primordial concept with him, and then he leaped. Not with a flashy shin, but a simple, powerful jump from the shoulders of his clones, straight into the heart of the pillar of light, towards the starry window. As he passed through the threshold, the thousands of clones below dissolved in a simultaneous, breathtaking wave of smoke, their purpose fulfilled. The harmonious light pulsed once, brilliantly, as if sealing the transaction. And then, Naruto Uzumaki was gone. The pillar of light vanished. The window closed. The pool was just a pool again, reflecting the now full night sky. The silence was absolute, and this time, it was filled with a profound, echoing absence. Percy let his power drop, slumping to his knees, utterly spent. Annabeth came to his side, putting an arm around him. They'd done it. They'd sent him home. Using a technique born of trust, amplified by a pyramid of clones, they'd achieved the impossible. Percy looked up at the stars, the normal, familiar stars of his own world. He could still feel a ghost of sun-gold chakra in the air, the echo of a laugh that was too loud, a will that was too bright. "He's really gone," Percy said, the words sounding small. "Yeah," Annabeth whispered, resting her head on his shoulder. "But he left a hell of a story." And high above, unnoticed by either of them, a single, stray wisp of golden chakra, the very last puff from a dispersing shadow clone, drifted on the desert breeze and settled, not vanishing, but sinking into the soil near the pool. A tiny, permanent seed of another world, left behind in the scar of the healed wound. Next. Chapter 15, The Aftermath and the Goodbye. The drive back to Camp Half-Blood was a journey through a world both familiar and subtly transformed. The violent tears in reality were gone, but the blending left its mark, a kind of cosmic patina. They passed a Nebraska cornfield where the stalks shimmered with an iridescent, chakra-like sheen under the sun. In Iowa, they saw a dryad tending a grove of trees that bore both acorns and what looked like delicate, papery cherry blossoms from Konoha. The creatures of myth seemed curious, rather than aggressive. A flock of Stymphalian birds perched on telephone wires, their metallic feathers clinking softly as they watched the battered green bin pass, their beady eyes intelligent and calm, not ravenous. The green machine, pushed beyond any sane limit, finally gave up its ghost outside Chicago with a terminal, gasket-blowing shutter, and a cloud of steam that smelled of oil and burnt hope. They abandoned it with a pat on its hot hood, a moment of silence for a noble, rattling steed, and caught a series of increasingly questionable buses the rest of the way. Percy slept. He slept through Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and most of Pennsylvania. A deep, dreamless sleep that was less rest and more a system reboot. When he finally woke for good somewhere in New Jersey, the hollow ache in his chest had settled into a permanent, quiet companion. It wasn't grief. It was the phantom limb of a bond that had stretched across dimensions. Annabeth was quieter too, her usual rapid-fire analysis turned inward. She'd fill notebooks with sketches of the fused phenomena they passed, her pencil capturing the impossible geometry of a world healing from a metaphysical wound. She was building a new branch of study in her mind, interdimensional cohesion. They spoke little of Naruto. It was too big, too raw. His name hung in the air between them, a shared, precious secret. They talked of everything else, the strange new plants, the oddly behaved monsters, what they'd tell Chiron. But every laugh felt like it had an echo, every quiet moment felt like it was missing a burst of orange energy. When the familiar pine tree of Half-Blood Hill finally came into view, a wave of overwhelming, complicated relief washed over Percy. It was home. But it was a home that now existed in a universe that had been irrevocably expanded. The news of their return preceded them. Campers poured out of activities, gathering at the base of the hill. There was no cheering. They just stared, wide-eyed, as Percy and Annabeth, looking like survivors of a shipwreck that had sunk in two different oceans, walked through the border. The camp felt different. The air hummed with a slightly higher frequency. The strawberry field smelled sweeter, with an undertone of something like ozone and green tea. At the archery range, a daughter of Apollo's arrow hit a target and blossomed into a brief shower of golden sparks before embedding itself. The campers just nodded as if this was normal now. Chiron was waiting for them on the porch of the big house, Mr. D beside him with a fresh can of Diet Coke. The centaur's face was etched with deep concern and awe. "You are alive," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And the world, it has changed." They told the story on the porch, as dusk painted the sky in oranges that were painfully reminiscent. They told it plainly, without grand embellishment. The wound, the fusion, algos, the amalgam, the harmony, the clone pyramid, the goodbye. They left out the worst of the personal torment, the soul shock, the sacrifice play. Some things were theirs alone. When they finished, the silence was profound. Even the forest seemed to be listening. Mr. D took a long sip of his soda. "A pyramid of clones," he said, shaking his head. "Inexcusably garish, but effective. I suppose the mortal plane is stuck with a slight tang of ramen in the metaphysical atmosphere now. Dreadful." Chiron's eyes were distant, seeing ages past and futures unknown. "You have done what no hero of legend has ever done. You did not merely defeat a foe from another realm. You formed an alliance with it. You healed a breach not with force, but with understanding. The worlds are not separate anymore. They are acquainted." That was the word for it. Acquainted. The days that followed were a blur of recovery and revelation. Percy's body healed, but his dreams were new. Sometimes he dreamed of vast, sun-dappled forests and the echoing call of a fox. Sometimes Naruto probably dreamed of the sea. A week after their return, they held a bonfire. It wasn't a mourning ceremony. It was a recognition. They told the campers a sanitized version, an ally from a distant world who helped them seal a great evil. They didn't say his name. It felt like giving away a sacrament. As the fire crackled, a daughter of Aphrodite named Lacey approached Percy. She had kind eyes and hair the color of strawberry blonde that now seemed to have strands of actual, shimmering gold woven through it, another subtle change. "That boy," she said softly, not looking at him, but into the flames. "The one who isn't here. He had the most unwavering heart I've ever felt. It was like a sun. Even from a distance, it was warm." She smiled a little sadly. "Love that transcends worlds. It leaves a mark on the air. It's beautiful." It wasn't a crush. It was an observation from an expert. Percy just nodded, a lump in his throat. Lacey placed a small, smooth seashell, one that glimmered with a faint, internal gold light, in his hand before walking away. The love subplot hadn't been a romance. It had been a resonance. A recognition of a heart so loud and true it could be felt across the camp, across dimensions. It resolved not with a kiss, but with a quiet acknowledgement of its existence and a seashell to remember it by. The final morning dawned clear and bright. Percy was at the canoe lake, finally helping to repair the last of the damage Naruto had caused on his explosive entrance. He was sanding a new plank of wood when he felt a presence. Annabeth walked up, holding 2 plates. On them were stacks of blue pancakes. But beside them, neatly arranged, were cups of instant ramen, steam rising in the morning air. They sat on the dock, eating in comfortable silence, the sun warm on their backs. The combination was weird, but it worked. "He'd hate this, you know," Percy said around a mouthful of ramen pancake hybrid. "The quiet. He'd be trying to organize a camp-wide who can yell the loudest competition." Annabeth smiled. "He'd be winning it." She stirred her ramen with her fork. "Do you think he's okay? Back home?" Percy looked out over the water, seeing not just the naiads, but a flicker of a memory, 1,000 determined faces building a pyramid to heaven. "That guy? He's probably already rebuilt the village, become Hokage, and invented a new kind of explosive ramen. He's fine. He left something here," Annabeth said quietly. "Not just the blend in the world. In us." Percy knew what she meant. He felt less like a solitary weapon, more like part of a larger, stranger tapestry. He had proof now that his way, loyalty, love, stubbornness, wasn't just a demigod trait. It was a universal constant. A ninja from another dimension fought the same way. After breakfast, they walked to the border. There were no grand speeches planned. It was just a feeling that the time for lingering goodbyes to a ghost was over. They stood at the crest of Half-Blood Hill, looking out at the road. Percy put his hand in his pocket and felt the golden seashell from Lacey. "He was the worst and the best," Percy said finally. "The loudest and the brightest," Annabeth agreed. "I'm gonna miss that idiot." "Me too." They stood there for a long moment, two veterans of a war no one else would ever fully understand, saying goodbye to a third who wasn't there. "Next time I see a weird tear in the sky," Percy said, a real grin finally breaking through, "I'm running the other way." Annabeth laughed, the sound clear and bright in the morning air. "Liar!" He knew she was right. If another sun whirlpool fell into his canoe lake, he'd probably just sigh, grab a spare plate of blue pancakes, and say, "You're late." They turned and walked back down into camp, into their changed, expanded, slightly ramen-scented world, side by side. The adventure was over. The story remained. And somewhere, in a village hidden in leaves, a sun was shining just a little bit brighter, warmed by the memory of a sea and a friendship that defied the very fabric of reality. Next. Chapter 16. The door left ajar. The peace at Camp Half-Blood was a living thing, tender and new. It grew like moss over the scars of their adventure, softening the edges but never fully erasing the shape of what had happened. 2 months had passed. The leaves on Talia's pine held a faint, shimmering edge in the dawn light that hadn't been there before. The campfire songs sometimes developed harmonies that seemed to resonate from a place just outside the known world. Percy's life had settled into a rhythm that was almost normal. He helped with training, did his, still dreadful, schoolwork via iris message, and spent long afternoons with Annabeth by the canoe lake, talking about everything and nothing. But in quiet moments, he'd find his fingers tracing the whorls of the gold-veined seashell in his pocket, or he'd stare at a particularly vibrant sunset and think, he'd say that's almost as bright as his jacket. He was in the Poseidon cabin one evening, trying to fix a leaky fountain that was mysteriously producing saltwater taffy instead of fresh water, when a soft thump landed on the roof. Not a bird. Too heavy. Then a light, familiar tap-tap-tap on his window. His heart did a funny, painful flip. He knew that cadence. He yanked the window open. Perched on the sill, backlit by the rising moon, was a toad. A massive, warty, sage-green toad the size of a bulldog. It blinked its large, placid eyes at him. In its wide mouth, it held a scroll sealed with red wax stamped with a spiral, the Konoha symbol. Percy stared. The toad made a low, croaking sound and spat the scroll onto his floor. Then, with another soft thump, it was gone. Hands trembling slightly, Percy picked up the scroll. It was made of a tough, fibrous paper that smelled of pine and distant mountains. He broke the seal. The writing inside was messy, energetic, and in Japanese. But as Percy's eyes scanned the characters, they shimmered and rearranged themselves into English. A side effect of the world's new intimacy, perhaps. "Hey, pawn guy. Bet you thought you were rid of me. Believe it. Things are crazy here. The village is good. They were worried when I popped back into the middle of the Hokage's office covered in desert dust and smelling like a weird ocean. Took a lot of explaining. Old Lady Tsunard almost had a hernia. But it's all good now. Turns out, some of your world's ambrosia smell stuck to me. Our medicine analyzed it, and now we have a new healing salve that works twice as fast. So thanks for that. Also, there's a cactus growing in Training Ground 3 that glows blue at night. Shikamaru says it's a drag. I think it's cool. Things are different. After what we saw, what we felt, it's hard to just go back to only thinking about one village. I keep looking at the sky. It feels bigger. Anyway, I'm working on it. On a way to say more than just a letter. The toad sages say the barrier is thinner now, but it's like trying to tune a radio to a station on another continent. Needs a huge signal. A synchronized signal from both sides. Be ready. Don't do anything stupid without me. Your friend, Naruto Uzumaki. P.S. Tell Annabeth I said hi. And that I figured out how to make the ramen cups taste like blue pancakes. It's not bad. P.P.S. I'm sending something with the toad. A trade. For the seashell. Percy's breath caught. He looked around the floor. There, next to his bunk, was a small, cloth-wrapped bundle he hadn't noticed. He knelt and unfolded it. Inside was a kunai knife. But it wasn't standard issue. The blade was forged from a dark, smoky metal that seemed to drink the light, but along its edge ran a hairline filament of brilliant celestial bronze, fused seamlessly into the chakra-conductive steel. It was a hybrid weapon, impossible and beautiful. The handle was wrapped in orange and black cord. Tied to the pommel was a tiny, intricately carved wooden fox charm. It was a piece of his world, forged with a piece of theirs. A symbol. A key, perhaps? Percy clutched the kunai and the letter to his chest, a laugh bubbling up that was half relief, half sheer joy. He wasn't a memory. He was a pen pal. An interdimensional pen pal who sent magical toads. He ran to find Annabeth. The plan, as it formed over the next few weeks, was insane. It made the clone pyramid look like a simple arithmetic problem. Naruto's letter hinted at it, a synchronized signal. The barrier was thin, but stable. To open a true, two-way passage, not a desperate tear or a one-way door, required an act of harmony so precise it would have to be conducted across the dimensional gap itself. They needed to play the same note in two different universes at the exact same time. Annabeth, with Chiron's help and every scrap of text from the big house attic, worked on the metaphysical theory. It involved laid lines, sympathetic resonance, and a focused expenditure of power that would have to be identical in nature and intent. Percy and Naruto, through a series of increasingly bizarre messenger toad deliveries, one arrived wearing a tiny pair of sunglasses and demanding flies, worked on the practice. The idea was this: at a pre-agreed time, in a place of aligned power on both worlds, they would each perform the spiraling oceanic Rasengan, the combined technique that had healed the wound. But not as a weapon. As a tuning fork. On Percy's end, he would use the hybrid kunai as a focus, channeling his power through the celestial bronze filament, aiming it not at a foe, but at the fabric of space itself, at the specific frequency of Naruto's chakra signature he still carried in his soul. On Naruto's end, he would do the same, using a focus he had forged, a water-filled orb from the springs of Konoha, infused with a drop of Percy's essence he'd apparently saved from their last combined technique. Annabeth had shuddered at the biological implications. The appointed day arrived. The location on their side was the healed pool at Hoover Dam, the scar tissue of the wound, the strongest point of connection. Percy, Annabeth, and Chiron stood at its edge. Mr. D had come too, for once looking vaguely interested, sipping a drink that shimmered between Diet Coke and something that smelled of ambrosia. "This is either going to be a monumental achievement in interdimensional diplomacy," Annabeth said, checking her celestial bronze chronometer, "or a spectacular way to turn yourself inside out." "Optimism, wise girl," Percy said, grinning nervously. He held the hybrid kunai. It felt warm in his hand, humming with a dual potential. In Konoha, Naruto stood on the peak of the Hokage monument, between the carved stone faces of the fourth and his own future spot. The village elders, Kakashi, Sasuke, Sakura, and the entire Toad Sage community were arrayed below, a mix of concern and awe on their faces. In his hand, he held the water orb, which swirled with a faint, sea-green light. The clocks were synchronized via sundial and star calculation, and one very confused mortal satellite signal Annabeth had borrowed. The moment came. Percy closed his eyes. He thought of Naruto, not just the memory, but the presence. The unyielding will, the stupid grin, the heart as big as a supernova. He poured that feeling, along with all his power as the son of the sea, into the kunai. He didn't form a Rasengan. He let the energy flow up his arm and out through the blade, a pure, focused beam of sea-green light and intent. It wasn't an attack. It was a handshake. A call. "Hey! You there?" On the mountaintop, Naruto did the same. He thought of Percy, the stubborn loyalty, the deep strength, the guy who complained about everything but never backed down. He poured his chakra, his sun-bright bond, into the water orb. It glowed, and a beam of gold and blue light, intertwined with the whisper of waves, shot from it into the clear sky. "Yeah, I'm here." For a terrifying second, nothing happened. Then, the world sang. At the dam, the calm pool erupted not with water, but with light. A pillar of harmonized energy, identical to the one they'd used to send Naruto home, shot into the sky. But this one was stable, permanent. And in its center, the starry window opened again. But this time, it didn't show a static image. It showed through. Percy could see the Hokage monument, clear as day, and the tiny, bright orange figure at its peak. And through Naruto's window, he could see the dam, and himself, staring back. The windows weren't just doorways. They were windows. And they held. A stunned, global silence held for 3 full seconds. Then, Naruto's voice, amplified by chakra and pure joy, echoed through both apertures, across 2 worlds. "Told you I'd figure it out! Believe it!" Cheers erupted, from the Konoha ninja below and from Annabeth and Chiron at the dam. Mr. D raised his can in a sardonic toast. Percy just laughed, the sound full of wonder. He could see Sasuke shaking his head with a faint smirk, Sakura crying happy tears, Kakashi giving a lazy thumbs up. Naruto was jumping up and down on the mountain peak. We did it! A permanent thing! Well, a sometimes thing. The sages say it'll only be stable during equinoxes, or when there's a lot of aligned chakra or something. But still, a thing. It wasn't a gateway for armies or mass migration. It was a people. A visitor's window. A way to talk, to share, to remember they weren't alone in the multiverse. The connection lasted for exactly 13 minutes before the synchronized energies began to naturally dissipate. The windows shrank, but didn't vanish catastrophically. They faded like a pleasant dream, leaving behind a lingering sense of connection in the air and a tangible, thin spot in reality at both locations, a door left deliberately, carefully ajar. Back at camp, in the aftermath of the impossible, Percy sat on his bunk. The hybrid kunai lay on his nightstand. On his desk, next to a half-finished geometry worksheet, sat the golden seashell and a new, framed photograph. The photo was a marvel. It showed the view from the Hokage monument, with Naruto giving a double thumbs up, and in the sky above him, a faint but clear image of Percy and Annabeth waving from the dam. A snapshot through the window. It was impossible. It was real. He picked up the seashell and the kunai, holding one in each hand. The cool, smooth calcium of his world, and the warm, humming metal of another. Some bridges, once built, could never truly be burned. They were built of shared chaos, a little terror, peanut butter cups, ramen, trust that stretched across the void, and a truly stupid amount of stubborn hope. The adventure was over. But the connection was just beginning. The story of the demigod and the ninja wasn't an ending. It was a hyphen. A link between two sentences in the grand, strange story of everything. And as Percy Jackson lay down to sleep, the sounds of Camp Half-Blood a gentle lullaby, he knew with a deep, peaceful certainty that somewhere, under a different sun, a ninja with a heart like a supernova was doing the same, dreaming of the sea, and smiling.